Good morning everyone and welcome to my next lesson on Charlie's Classroom. Today I'm going to be taking you through a step-by-step on how to create this lovely watercolour painting. For this activity you're going to need some watercolour paint, one large and one small paintbrush, one piece of watercolour paper and a tub to wash your brushes in, some white acrylic paint to create the stars and the moon in your artwork. Please feel free at any point to pause my video if you need to slow down on any of the steps. And don't forget that when you get to the end, you will find my email address. And if you'd like to email through your artwork, I'd love to have a look at those at the end. So I hope you enjoy this activity and let's get started. Before you start, make sure that you have put down something to protect the table. This could be newspaper, spare paper, or a painting mat. On the table, lay out the materials you will need, including your watercolour palette, some white acrylic paint, a tub of water, at least one large and one small paintbrush, and a piece of watercolour paper. The first step is to dip your large brush into a tub of clean water and use it to wet your watercolour paper. Make sure the whole page is wet by moving your brush side to side. The second step is to wet your brush and dip it into a light blue. You can always test the colour on a spare piece of paper. Apply the colour over the entire page using long, smooth brush strokes side to side. The third step is to wet your brush and dip it into a dark blue. Again, apply the dark blue with long, smooth brush strokes side to side, but this time only go down to about halfway. The dark blue should appear at the top of the paper and gradually blend to the light blue towards the bottom of the paper. This will add a nice contrast in the sky, as though the sun has set and darkness of the evening is creeping in. It is now time to let the background dry by either leaving it for 10 minutes or using a hairdryer on low speed. Remember that if you choose to use a hairdryer, don't hold it too close to the paper because it will push the water and paint around on it. For step number 4, you will need a small paintbrush, preferably with a pointed tip so that you can create a thin line, and a green watercolour paint. Begin painting thin vertical lines of different lengths across the bottom of your page to create the tree trunks. Next, come back to the tip of the first line and paint down each side of each vertical line a series of small diagonals to replicate branches on the trees. Continue this for each tree trunk. fifth step is to paint a second layer of trees on top of the first layer. I purposely painted the vertical lines at a shorter height than the first set to create depth. By doing so, the trees appear closer than the first row, which makes the artwork more three-dimensional and realistic. The sixth step is to create the stars. For this step, squeeze a small amount of white acrylic paint onto your spare piece of paper and dip the round wooden end of your paintbrush into it. Begin to dab small dots onto the blue sky of your artwork. Remember that stars are not evenly placed or the same brightness when you look up at the night sky, so some of your dots may be clumped close together and applied with less pressure, and others may be further apart and applied with more pressure. A little tip that I find helpful when trying to create tiny little dots is to have my pinky resting on the artwork so that I have more control of the paintbrush. The last step is to paint a little half moon in the sky using the pointy tip of a small paintbrush. And as always, don't forget to sign your artwork on the bottom right hand side.